Well, it's a real pleasure to welcome you both to this talk. I'm really excited to get to talk to both of you. Widow's Bay really kind of snuck up on me and has become my favorite show this year. And there are a lot of reasons for that. The horror, the comedy, the setting, the characters, everything. It's nice to have you here, Katie and David. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
I wanted to start with this. For me, it's important, I think, that when this show was released, in the lead up to summer, it's an important part of why, for me anyway, this show had a kind of profound impact, because it became like a getaway for me, like many summer getaways are. And it made me think of my youth and growing up and the things, the movies that I saw during the summer, like for instance, The Lost Boys or Stand By Me, Jaws, Goonies. You know, these are movies that introduce you to places that are small and tucked away from the rest of the world. But in the story, they're the center of the world. And I feel like that's really what was grabbing me about this. It brought you into this place, Widow's Bay. And, you know, it made me think of Stand By Me, the beginning of Stand By Me, when Richard Dreyfuss is narrating. And he said, I was 12 going on 13 the first time I saw a dead human being. I was living in a small town in Oregon called Castle Rock. It was only 1,281 people, but to me, it was the whole world. And that is kind of what I'm getting from this show. And I kind of want to know if you agree with that, and was the release of this show kind of leading up to summer so that when people saw it at, you know, going into summer, maybe in their places, wherever they're vacationing, it would have more of an impact. Did that factor into the calculation of when this show came out?
I love that sort of, as they call it, summerween feel. I love a good horror movie that comes out in the summer, just like you said. It's also a lot of the stories about Loftus, the mayor, trying to bring tourism into the island, so it just seemed fitting it would be during the summer. I would love to set at some point for us to do a season that takes place in the fall, but for this one, it just felt like, while he has the dream of Martha's Vineyard, that it would take place. But also, yeah, I just have so many memories of being scared at night when, you know, watching a horror movie and hearing the crickets outside. Like, that just, I don't know, that just makes my heart happy.
I do like the idea of like a Richard Dreyfuss narration, you know, Loftus way in the future, like this was the summer that everything went wrong. But I don't want to speak for Katie about the films that she loves, but there was one, the conversation really early on was about a type of horror that feels like a ride and is very fun. And, you know, the idea of the scare and laughing kind of being connected. And it was one of the first things we talked about. And the other thing, I think I responded to the same thing that you did, Charles, about like, I love movies or TV where there is like a universe that feels real, that kind of invites you in. And it was something that was so kind of charming about Widow's Bay, even though, you know, despite the horror and everything, that the charm was pervasive, and you didn't dread going to Widow's Bay. I remember when I used to watch horror movies as a little kid, it would be like, I would secretly, especially if I was watching with my friends, I would secretly like really want it to be the next day, because there was always that the next morning when everything is kind of reset. And I would dread whenever it was headed back into darkness. And I feel like the nice thing about this show was you kind of get to experience both of those at the same time, that there's like, the horror is real, but the charm of the place is just as real. So for me, that was kind of the draw.
I heard the great director for this show, one of them, Hiro Murai, say that every creator and every person involved came and invested in the world to some extent, or to a great extent. And I'm wondering, David, how did that apply to you? Like, how did you prepare and become invested in a place like this? I mean, I know a lot of it was was Katie's writing so clear, and from her imagination, from a script that sounds like it took many years to come together, and almost like Katie, like maybe like your first novel in a sense. But how did you come into this show in the way that Hero described it, as already invested in what you were about to write music for?
I don't know that I was right away. I think Katie, when Katie, because we talked about it before I saw it, and it's kind of one of those things that is not, you can't figure out from just hearing about it. You kind of have to see it and experience it. And I had, the idea of horror comedy, I think, and I think Katie feels the same way, is something that's like a bit of,
it sounds bad.
I don't know. Well, it sounds like it should work, but it doesn't always work. Right. And so I was a little, I was a little worried about it until I saw it. And there's a couple jokes that happened pretty early in the first episode that I kind of fell in love with immediately. And then I started to and then as the episode went on, especially through the second episode, I started to understand the tone of the place, because you kind of have to, it really, you start to understand it more and more the more you watch it. And so kind of by the end of watching those first two episodes, I was fully in, and it gave me this feeling of like reading, I used to read a lot of collections of short stories when I was a kid, like horror short stories. And it gave me a feeling of being in one of those collections where the whole thing makes you feel a similar way, but each one is sort of self-contained. And that was a very exciting idea to me as well, that we could explore these self-contained stories. But so much of my personal investment, I think, grew over time, and especially through our meetings and understanding Katie more and her point of view. And so although I bought in the first couple episodes, it just, I don't know, I kept getting deeper into it, and just really feeling by the end of it, like, I just want to live in this place.
Can I tell you too? I remember when I first met with Dave, and actually it was after you had signed on. I was the first meeting after that point. And I remember we were talking about the episodes, and I know how hard it was to write the episodes, because it's doing a really weird thing where each episode wants to feel like a standalone feeling. Like you want each episode feels like, okay, this is the end episode, or this is the Boogeyman episode, or this is Patricia's party. And so those things all stand alone, but you're still doing a serialized, unified piece. And that was one of the biggest challenges. And I had much more time with the scripts than Dave had with the music, times a million. And so I remember meeting with him thinking, knowing how hard that was to figure out. And he, at that point, he's like, yeah, great, like excited. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if he knows yet. I don't know if he knows how hard this is going to be. But he's a machine, like he's a maniac that just worked tirelessly and did it all on time and beautifully. So it still blows my mind, because I remember that moment being like, God, I hope he can pull this off. And if not, that's going to be very stressful. And I'm still shocked that he did.
I definitely sensed the reticence. But no, it was also one of those things where like each challenge kind of did the opposite of maybe what Katie expected it to. Like it just kind of pulled me in more each time there was like a new, hey, this episode's got to be this crazy thing. It did the opposite, where I just wanted to get more involved in it.
Katie, I wonder, it is a hard thing to try to communicate what you have spent so long building up in your mind and your imagination and putting on a paper. It sounds like it took years, and you kept on chipping away at it. And using your experiences to kind of fuel the writing and creating a setting and these wonderful characters. It's one thing to see that come to life on screen with all these wonderful performances, Kato Flynn and Matthew Rhys and all these people, and see that and say, yeah, this is lining up with what I wanted and what I imagined. But I imagine it's quite a different thing for the music. How is it that you arrived on where you wanted to go with the music and communicating that to David? Because it seems like maybe a little bit more ambiguous, right? Because maybe you didn't really, were you imagining music when you were writing this all this time, or was that something that came later?
No, and to be completely honest, I didn't think there'd be a ton of score in it. I thought for horror, like tension, there'd be stings and, moments of building, horror sort of sounds. But I thought it would mostly be like just like some diegetic music and not much else, because I'm really allergic to comedy score. And there's like, there's like a comedy, it's like, bum, 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 in that sort of feeling. Like I just watched another movie that had it. I'm like, you don't need it. But, so because of that, I really had in my mind that there wouldn't be that much. But then you're watching it and you realize, oh wait, no, it does need it. But I still didn't know what that would sound like. I knew what I didn't want it to sound like. I knew I was trying to avoid, I didn't want it to feel too quirky or whimsical. There are certain things I really wanted to avoid. And I think I expressed a lot of that to Dave. But what that would sound like, I wasn't sure. And I remember the first time Dave played something, I was like, oh, yes, yeah, that's it. That's great. That's wonderful. It was such a relief, because it felt like, and then it was really like watching the show come together. And because I really think one of the trickiest things about this show, I mean, this is maybe something to get into later, but switching from the horror to the comedy is really tricky in this show, because if you get used to having score for the scenes that are tense, then when you switch to something comedic, especially when there's a show like this that's a slow burn, it can feel weirdly quiet. And then that could make you think, oh, but then it's not funny. So we had to be really careful about stuff like that, like how to plan for that. But but the long story short, I really didn't know what the music was going to sound like. I just knew what I was trying to avoid.
And David, it sounds like you nailed it right away. I mean, is that not the case? What were some of the touchstones? I have a couple in mind of what I'm thinking of that may have fed into what you came up with, but I'm just curious.
My experience was, I also have an allergy to comedy music, which I was very happy to hear that Katie did. But, in the same way, I was worried about just going horror as well. So I think my first pitch to Katie was like more about let's make it sort of the sound of the score centered around the mystery of the town and like curiosity more so than anything. And we'll get to the horror, but I really thought it was important that like, because that world building was done so well in every department, that the music be a part of that as well, and that it feel like part of the town. To me, I think some of the most complicated parts were where the horror parts were a little more straightforward in a lot of ways, and I've done that before. And the tricky tone of the show made some of the, like the first episode, for instance, I think was one of the trickier ones, because it's a lot of setting up the characters and setting up the world, and like the music had to be real careful about where it would go. And more often than not, I gave Katie more more music than needed to be there, you know, and it wasn't always like, I'm definitely sure about this. It was more like, hey, should we try it? Should we try it? Should we try it? Should we try it? But really for me, I think the very last cue of the first episode was kind of where I felt that we had found something, which is like, it's kind of also the only time in the first episode that the music has free reign, where we're not sort of dancing around dialogue. And it's like where we sort of get subterranean and see, we sort of get our first hint of like the dark heart of the island. And I got to like play something that smashed into credits, and it started the first, Katie said something that I would like chase for the rest of the show, which is like, oh, this is my new favorite thing. That became like the goal of like every episode, to try to get her to have a new favorite thing in the episode. But yeah, I think that it was, I think I had the same goalpost as Katie, but she's got such a specific barometer of what will work in the universe and what won't. So a lot of times it was like we would get closer and closer and closer the more times I sort of hit up against the boundaries of the universe and the tone.
The two things I remember very well from the pilot was when you played that end track, when the camera goes down through the floors and into the end credits. And I was so excited because I feel like with horror and comedy, for me, the one thing that I have in common is that there's this sense of fun, and it worked for all of it. And it's very propulsive, and it just made me want to watch more of the show, and I was so excited about it. This show does really well when you can inject some tension or energy into it in a way that doesn't take it off track, and I thought that was perfect. But I think one of the hardest ones was Loftus going into town hall. I remember that being, because it's like it's not quite scary, but we weren't doing comedy music, but it's like, what's that sound? And I love the sound that's there, but I remember that being one of the harder ones to crack.
No reports of serious damage or injuries. Hope I'm not the only one with a generator.
The entire island is out.
This is exactly why I wanted to use the Rule 28 credits. Anyone talk to Mitch?
Rosemary says he's not in yet, but she's trying him at home.
Yeah, Loftus in general, and trying to, like, Matthew's performance is so good. And I think we did try a few different tempos. I think originally my tempo for him was a little faster, a little more manic. And we had to like bring it back a bit because, you know, he didn't need extra caffeine. You know, it was like, but
he was already on that wavelength. Yeah.
But it was an important cue because it's like the first, there's a cue before that's in the fog and the horror, which kind of is like an appetizer, but it is the first bit of audio that says this is every day in this town, and this is our mayor. And so it was pretty important. So I remember, now that you mention it, I remember spending some time on that.
I really liked that sound. I really liked it too, because it doesn't feel, I think the thing I also wanted to avoid is the show ever feeling like a fantasy, because you have to really feel like at any moment you could die or you could laugh. Like you have to be ready for anything around the corner. So anyways, what I like about that sound is it just sets a mood for this weird island, but it's not going too fantastical or whimsical either. There's so much about this was the levels, and I really loved that.
You know, when I was mentioning touchstones, and see what you think about this, David. I mean, we're speaking of stories like set in New England, like that came from Stephen King. Book adaptations for the screen like Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, for example. And you get those really amazing scores from Thomas Newman in those cases. What I always enjoyed about Thomas Newman's music, beyond the kind of icy emotive, thing that he nails better than anybody, I think, is this kind when he gets into these percussive cues too, and there's this kind of tin pan side of a wooden box, staccato hits, open percussive things that I got a lot of and really enjoyed in those movies that I was talking about, and that I think that you really captured as well.
I do love Thomas Newman. He's one of my favorites. I've been talking about him a lot this past couple of weeks, actually. But I didn't think about those scores. But what I did think about is what the sound of like a New England town would feel like to me. And not all of that was literal, like, oh, we're going to use this instrument. It was kind of like a lot of textural thoughts. Actually, to be honest, when we started the show, I knew there was like a moment that we were going to go back into like the colonial times, and I was like, should the whole one of my original ideas when I was like looking through like old whaling songs and colonial pieces of music was like, should the whole score be of this older era? It might make a little bit of sense, but then it would really make sense once they went back. But ultimately, we sort of saved that for that one episode. I thought a lot about like elemental things like wind and wood and creaking, and so a lot of the I think some of it's just instinctual about what the town sort of brings up in terms of sounds for me. Like I thought the voice and wind instruments were kind of nice for the fog and this idea of being near the water, and everything would be a bit old. It was important to me that like nothing sounded, although there's tons of synths and process things, I didn't want anything to sound modern in a digital way or anything like that. So there wasn't anything specific musically referential, but it was a lot of like what sounds would make sense in this universe.
Dave would pull out instruments that I'm like, what the hell is this thing? And honestly, he could have been pranking me the whole time. Like he was pulling out anything in his desk drawer and acting like it was an instrument.
It's probably when I'm like, I don't know what the hell to do here, and I'm just like, okay, I'll do it. But that's kind of how I write too. Is just like is just pulling it. I'll keep a lot of instruments around me and also like YouTube videos of strange instruments that I'll keep filed away for the right thing. And but there's ways to, there's like traditional guys who every score is orchestral and you use the orchestra to your advantage. And this score got more orchestral as the episodes went on. But I always like the idea of matching the sonic universe. So it's not just about the notes, but it's about the sound of the notes, that it should match the images somewhat.
Yeah, these kinds of cues that I'm talking about, these more percussive, kind of acoustic percussive cues, I think really worked so well when the music started to ratchet up into the more terrorizing horror cues, it takes on this formidable force coming for you, and it's inescapable. That's what this kind of music from David did for me. The stomping, kind of like something is bearing down on you and you can't get away from it.
You know, I also always thought that I always loved the end credit score that Dave would do. And it's funny, I remember there was a thing with Apple where there's some rule that if a certain position is included in the credits, then you have to make the credits go on much longer before it gets to that skip button. And and I remember it was
I see you're shaking your head, David. I hate that too.
I know, and when it came up, they're like, "Well, if you put this person earlier, then that means we have to, keep the credits going longer." And I was like, "Great, it's good news. This is a good problem."
Yeah.
Because it was one of my. But I also love I feel like his music sometimes, we didn't do a lot of kind of. You get a glimpse of what's happening the next episode, but then his music would do that for the show, which I thought was really awesome.
Yeah, the credits were super fun, and Katie really, I've never had somebody, everyone kind of at least in my world says that thing like, oh, the skip to the next episode is the worst, and I've heard it a lot, but I've never had somebody actually go to bat to help with that issue. So that was so awesome that we got a few more seconds of listenable airtime before it's in Your Friends and Neighbors or whatever. But the credits ones were really, really fun, and it was always I did want to make it not really cliffhanger, but the idea that when it's done, you say, "Oh my God, that was so much fun! I can't wait to watch the next episode." Just the feeling of wanting to come back again.
Well, one specific example I have to give is at the end of 108, you just see a glimpse on the news, on the local news in the hospital room, a storm's coming. And it's the storm of the century. And then when Wick shows up at Loftus's door, there's wind in the background, but that's really it. But then Dave's score builds that feels like there's a storm coming. It really just, I don't know, it does a tremendous amount for us.
Yeah, it's true. The end credits, they kind of punctuate how the one episode would end. But like you say, really, as the terror becomes more real, as the story is evolving, those cues set up that kind of doom that is somewhere in the background that's coming out of the shadows. And I really felt like that was so effective in the way you did. And, a couple of the episodes too, when there was maybe something a little bit more funny, would end on like a source selection. Whatever that song, "This Is the Rhythm of the Night" that Kay is dancing to at Sunset Cocktails.
Can I tell you one of my favorite stories about one of the songs in this season is, and this is one of my favorite memories of the show and why I love collaboration now. But we're doing 108 and Patricia needed to be listening to a song in her bedroom, and the editor, Kyle, was like, "What's a song Patricia will be listening to?" And I was looking through my phone as a woman in my mid-40s. I was like, okay, what's something that I think is like good music, but it's just weird to be listening to? And the two things that jumped off my phone were The Last of the Mohicans soundtrack, which obviously we could never do, or the Enya song, Caribbean Blue. And but we just had it in her bedroom. And then I loved that song so much. I was like, should it be the end credits? But there was something about it, like we had done that move a couple times. And so when we were spotting it in Dave's studio, I was like, I don't think we can do it for the end credits. And then we were just about to spot the section where Patricia has the shotgun on the boogeyman. And then Dave's wife and producer, Monica, was like, I think that should be where you put the Enya song. And then we were all like, huh. And then Dave just played it, and it just matched perfectly for it. And we were like, all like, whoa. And then Dave turned to me, he's like, you have to use that song. It's one of my favorite parts.
I have to tell you, that was like such a big deal in my household because not only was it a really good idea, but that song specifically, my wife Monica is a huge Enya fan, and that song is like on her like, if I die, you have to play this at my funeral song. And so the fact that it was already in the episode and then it worked, she was just like, I could retire now. This is my best, this is my favorite accomplishment ever.
So great.
But the show can handle that kind of juxtaposition and the sort of cheekiness of it without being like too silly. I don't know, because we were talking about that to have score on it originally, that whole sequence, and I was a little bit like, I don't know what to do here, you know, which is, you know, to be fair, how I start every single meeting. But yeah, I think also about, you know, right after one of the most terrifying moments when like Loftus finally hears the voice of the island at the end of 105, then it cuts to like 311 Amber, and it's just, the juxtapositions are really, really fun. And, you know, I think for Katie, when I was doing music that was tension and horror, I think for her that was like, oh, like very straight up Dave's, you know, doing horror music. But for me, especially, like, you know, I've done so much horror music, especially for things like The Last of Us. This felt like the flavor of horror music I got to do here, where it always had like a little bit more fun in it, a little bit less straight up dread. Maybe it's subtle to everyone except me, but for me, I was like, I'm getting to do fun music. You know, it wasn't like, it wasn't about doing scary things. It was about having fun. And that was like what a lot of those end credits things ended up being as well, because there weren't often long runs of music in the episode. And I was enjoying writing for this world so much that the end credits were like, I just get 2 minutes to play in this sandbox. And so that's kind of the mindset that all that came from.
It is like, it's so funny. I think mine and Dave's definition of fun, Dave is like me, where I say something is fun and they imagine something silly and cute, but I think like The Exorcist is fun. Do you know what I mean?
We discovered that our definitions were slightly different. I remember, I hope you're okay with me telling this. There's one scene in one of the later episodes where the son is like reading the letters of his mom, like starting to go insane. And I was like chilled to the bone by this, like sincerely chilled. Katie was just like, oh, that was one of the most fun writing days we had. I know. And it doesn't, and I learned when we were shooting it, I'm like, okay, this is not going to play funny. I see that now. in the writer's room, having one of our writers, Neil Casey, do the voice of the mom reading those letters we've never laughed so hard. But that's not the experience for the audience, and I've accepted that. And I think Dave scored it appropriately. That you can take either way. You can, whatever you want from it.
It is funny. It was funny. And the way that the actor who played Evan delivered it too was like, oh, I have a nice little letter to read from my mom. You want to hear it?
Yeah, I read the letters. Can I read one? Dear Evan, I need your baby hands to get the keys and your little fingers to reach up my nose to pull the scorpion out of my brain. Watch out for that stinger. Love, your mother.
Dave is also very patient with, I feel like we developed a vocabulary for things because I don't understand the jargon. And you would never know that there's anything wrong with that based off of his interactions. He's very kind. But things like there are moments where, he could write like the coolest music ever. But then if we felt like, oh, but now I feel like I want to follow this cool movie and I'm just about to laugh. So having to ask someone if I think we talked about like, does this feel too A24 in this moment was, like there's certain like things, the only, like I had like 6 things. I'm like, is it this? Does that feel too this? And Dave always was very patient about that.
But the thing about it is that because it's not a typical genre show, the things that you might accept as objectively the right thing to do didn't always apply, and it was more Katie's like internal barometer that dictated rightness and wrongness in a way that really proved out. Because one other thing I have to give Katie a ton of credit for is there was a scene in 109 that I was like, this needs score so bad, and it was the genealogy scene of that just goes on and on, which is the funniness of it, but it's also like the part of me that's experienced so many movies and as a composer and how you're supposed to protect the film and blah 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 was like, oh, we need to have people are going to they're going to tune out or I was just, there was like a nervousness about we need to put music in there. And I don't know if I was the only one who thought that, but
no, many people did. Don't worry.
but Katie stuck to it. I did a whole cue, and I think it functioned in a typical way, maybe, and Katie was like, no, I think it should have no music, and people loved it. People absolutely loved it. I have a writer friend of mine who said she was so jealous of that scene in particular. And I do have to wonder how much of it is just, it's obviously an hilarious scene, but it's also the boldness with which it's presented. And some of that comes down to, let's not have music be like a palliative of the kind of the tempo of the scene. Let's commit to the tempo. And there were several things like that in this series that Katie, you were totally right, and
it was risky. Like I'm sure there are people that agreed, wish there were music in it, but the comedy writer in me was like, I just got to double down here. I'm sorry, even if everyone turns on us, like I just have to, right? Yes, we all have to suffer like Loftus does. No, just have to do it.
But also to go back to what I was saying earlier about like the show, I was kind of falling in love with the show more and more as it would go on. I think it also, by that time in the series, people really understood what the show was, and they understood and I think it was like a great time in the show to unleash something like that. And if it was the first episode, I probably would have really
if this was the first episode, no one would have ever watched the second for sure. Yeah.
Here's where we reach a few ends that are dead. Dead baby, lesbian. Sophia the heretic marries Byron Fairclough. These jackrabbits have 6 kids, and some of them have a few of their own, but you know what they say, family that swims together, drowns together.
I think my favorite piece of music is actually the start of 110, when Loftus is driving to Ruth's house. And it's always interesting to me because I don't even know what genre of music I would put that in, because it's not horror music, it's not comedy music, but I'm just in it. Like I don't think I had a single thought on that. It was just perfect. I think that's my favorite thing in the whole show. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well,
He's right. Every episode is my new favorite thing. So by the time we got to 10, that was funny.
I agree. There's something about it that's nicely, it's over him just sort of driving with that look in his eyes. And also, I think you guys cut it off dead on the, like, I sort of had built to the cut of him in front of Ruth's house, but they like killed the reverb trail and everything. And it's like a very bold move, and it makes it.
That was Isaac, our editor, did that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many plateaus that this show operates on, and you kind of dancing around all of them. And you are towing a line that seems to be very difficult to do. And then you have this middle passage of the show, episode 6, Our History, where it gives you a context of how this island came to be what it is, and some of the dark past and history and why it's cursed and why it's damned. And you're going back 200 years, and Katie, you get to play around with different language in that sense. David, you also, right, are getting an opportunity to play around with a language that you maybe haven't been playing with in the other episodes leading up to it or even after it. Were you exploring different instruments that might have been kind of around that time, like maybe a nickel harpa or something like that, some of the strings? So what was that like for you, also playing around with different language?
Yeah, that one was probably I really like put a challenge to myself for that episode. Like I really wanted that one specifically to kind of be like a movie outside of the rest of the show, and in the way the music functioned as well. And when I started it, I really thought of it as this is going to be complete standalone. But weirdly, it ended up informing a lot of the score after it. It, you know, as you said, it's sort of the first time we get to get to the bottom of it in a way. And the score hadn't been really thematic. It's got motifs that are repeating and things like that. But there were thematic materials that I didn't plan on sort of informing the rest of the score. But as we figured out about like what the curse was, then I ended up realizing, okay, well, the music that I'm doing here is going to end up telling the story of the curse and of the Warrens for the rest of the score. And so unintentionally, it sort of skewed the back half of the season much more orchestrally, and we recorded live strings. And on that episode, like as you say, like we're doing instruments of the period, so we did viola da gamba and Baroque cello. They were both very specific requests from Katie. She said, "Can you please record viola da gamba?" But then also, it weirdly unlocked things in the front half of the season as well. Maybe a little too late, but we were talking, I think, in a meeting about, okay, well, I'm going to record these period instruments. But even when you go back in that period, you realize that there is a more ancient nature to the darkness in the island. And so I thought, well, conch shells, it's a seaside town. There should be something about like the sound of a shell that could allude to something even more ancient. And I think we all kind of loved the idea so much. And we actually ended up finding a couple places in episodes 1 and 2 that were still finishing their mix. I was like, well, just throw it on top of this cue, throw it here. Maybe it can work, because I thought it was something that we hadn't locked into yet, and so that episode unlocked a lot for me, not only as its own thing, but just it's kind of the skeleton key for the rest of the series musically, I think. it's always the kind of thing that by the time you're at episode 10, even the very last cue that I did, I was like, why didn't I think of this before?
It's so funny. I didn't know that how much 106 unlocked for you or why, but I do remember thinking after, like, oh, he's really cooking now. So now it's funny to hear how it all came together.
Well, also there's just like little competitive challenges with myself too. Like, I think about scores like The Village or something, and I'm like, there's a score like that sort of committed to having a more acoustic feel, and the nature of what I do is usually like a lot of processed elements. You don't know what's real and what's electronic, and that episode I wanted to be more authentically acoustic, and then that just kind of, once I sort of didn't die doing that episode, I was like, well, this should continue on. So, there's crazy violin acrobatics for a while after that, and we just kind of kept going. It was fun.
If you were faced with the choice to do a big feature film, like, you did Superman, obviously, or like a smaller kind of series like this, I would have thought maybe when I first started doing this, like the feature film for sure, right? But now the more that I'm thinking about it and realizing that some of my favorite score music is ending up in shows and series like this, it seems like there's more opportunities to maybe play around and try different things and play around with different emotions and tones. What do you have more fun doing? Or are they rewarding in different ways?
I enjoy doing both, and I will continue to do both until someone says I'm not allowed to do both. I really like... And it's the truth that my favorite thing about this job is that you get to get thrust into totally different worlds all the time. Like, I can't think of one of the happiest times I ever had was I was doing like this rom-com called Eternity at the same time I was doing The Last of Us, and it was like the darkest possible scenes, and then in the afternoon I would do this like beautifully melodic warm stuff. But I really do think I don't discriminate at all between the two forms. I really think it's about the people telling the story, and in this case, Katie, Hero, like everyone wanted to make something really special, and I think you can do that in either form. I will say, there's something about a series that, and I'm so thankful that we have season 2, because there's like, it's a chance to go deeper into things, not only story wise, but also musically, to explore things. Like I said, that final cue of the final episode, which also is something that I have to give Katie credit for, because it's my favorite piece of music that I did, but it's also was a total plan B, because my plan A failed spectacularly. It was like, this is going to be my big ender, and Katie so politely and endearingly rejected it, and fully. And
then he came back with my other favorite piece. I mean, it's incredible.
But he created. It was also, at that time we didn't know we were getting a season 2, so I was like, this is might be my last time in the theme park, and I have to have fun with this.
But again, like you guys were talking about before, it does feel like it sets up that, I wouldn't call it a cliffhanger, but it sets up more. It sets up more to come,
Totally. I feel like his music always just makes me want to keep watching, and I think it's really incredible.
Katie, are you have you already started to form, or is it already formed, the ideas for where this is going to go, being that you've been writing it for so long? I mean, is this something that you kind of understand the direction it's going in, or do you just still need to kind of keep going and see what comes to the screen?
No, I have an idea for season 2, and we're in the writer's room right now. Don't let this blank whiteboard scare you behind me, but they're in there. They're fine. You know, we're doing great. But no, it's gonna be fun.
Amazing. Well, thank you both. I'm excited to see the next season, and hopefully as many more as you want to do, because it's really, really one of my favorite shows. And I just can't wait. I already watched it again because I just want to be in that world. So I can't wait for it to come back.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Charles.
Many thanks to our guests today, and if you'd like to listen to more conversations from the SoundWorks collection, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on all major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube. You can also find exclusive daily video clips on our Instagram and TikTok pages, and connect with other creatives around the world through our email industry mailing list at soundworkscollection.com. If you have a story or project that you want to propose for the show, please send us an email at info@soundworkscollection.com. And thanks again for listening.